Thank you very much, Son, for the nice introduction, and thank you to all of you for being here. Just a quick check, can you all hear me fine in the back? Can you all see what's written in the old iPad there? That's good. So we have a lot on the agenda, so we better get started. Yes, we'll appear here. So what is your PhD about? It's a question that I've heard a lot in the past few years, and hopefully we will answer this today. Basically two main topics. One is on media convergence, and so I will define what it is, what we mean by media convergence, and try to give you some insight of what the future in this field will be. And to study this field, I employed a number of quantitative and qualitative methods, namely user studies, end-user studies, and I will spend the second half of the presentation discussing some of those. However, I won't have time to go through all the studies that have been conducted during my PhD. So this is where you come in, and I hope some of you, or most of you actually, have either a smartphone or maybe a tablet with you. Because what I will ask you to do is to go on this web page during the presentation, during the first half of the presentation, and you will get to vote for the two of the methods that we will be discussing in the second half of the presentation. So not only this will make this presentation a bit more interactive, but it will also give you an opportunity to experience one of the areas that we have been exploring in this project, namely second screens. And what you have to do is to think about this presentation as a TV show where I'll be the host, and you will have access through this application on this website to a number of extra documents and extra relevant information, and you will also get to vote and choose what we will be talking about in the next part. I have a version for you. You can be here. It's already made, so you don't have to think too much about it. There is some credential here for the Wi-Fi. All right. A word about the framework of this PhD project, which has taken part within the CAM project, which stands for Converged Advanced Mobile Media Platform. And basically, it's a national project that has been running for 4 years, between 2008 and 2012, in an iterative cycle logic. We had 4 iterations where, in our work package, which was responsible for dealing with the user requirements, we went through a number of test iterations, and every year we were building a test campaign and delivered the results of those tests to the other work packages in charge of implementation and other activities. This is typical from also user-centric design project, where you start by thinking about requirements, coming with some design solutions for this, based on these requirements, evaluate those design ideas, and either release the product or go back into another iteration and think about new requirements and so on. This also explains why in my work the research I have done is not a straight line from conceptual to typical and usability evaluations. It's more following this cycle, we've been investigating concepts and some specific aspects of interaction with technology, which brought some new ideas for concept and so on and so on. So it's not a straight line from overall to specific, but it's more of a cycle. But what do we mean by media convergence? This is a buzzword that we've heard quite a lot lately, but what does it entail? Basically, we can take the example of the mobile phone you had about 10 years ago. It looked a bit like this, and over the past few years, we've added a lot of technology and a lot of different functions. So now your smartphone is capable of checking your emails, taking nice quality pictures. It serves as a GPS, and it's basically what we call a smartphone. And whether you agree or not, if your phone is smart or not, that's not the question. But the point is that this device is now a converging point for a lot of technology. Another aspect that we can think about is the evolution of television and computers in the past years. Nowadays, you have access to all or most of the TV functions on your computer, so you can watch TV on your computer, you can record TV on your computer. and inversely, you have more and more access to computer functions on your TV. That's what we call the smart TVs that you've heard of, I guess. So whether the TV is becoming more like a computer or the computer becoming more like a TV is a question that we are still trying to answer. But this is only one aspect of the project. This is only the technological aspect. We can think about some other areas where convergence happens. Think about culture, for instance. With the rapid spread of information throughout the world, you have really converging economies, and you have this phenomenon where something happens at some part of the world, and at the same time in some other parts. So that's also something to consider. From the broadcaster, it's also quite interesting to consider convergence. Think about how YouTube disrupted the way broadcasters deliver their media to audiences, and how, for instance, for private broadcasters, it can be a threat to their business model. But at the same time, it's also a great opportunity to have access to a broader audience and on different platforms. And for end users, for us, for you, it's also very very challenging these days, or maybe not challenging, but it's the way we consume media, the way we access media nowadays has nothing to do with how we did maybe 10 years ago. And this is going very rapidly. To give you a few examples on how fast this is going, consider that every minute of the day, there is the equivalent of 2 days of video that is uploaded on YouTube. And that's quite a lot, and since basically if we had to sit down and watch all the content that has been uploaded since Selene started talking a little bit earlier, we would have to sit in front of the computer or the TV for nearly a month. So that's quite insane. That's going very fast. Another number that I like, in the first quarter of 2012, there were more iPhones sold in the world than babies born. This is quite amazing. So this is not about just phones, it's about smartphones, and it's about just one brand. Very famous brand, but still one brand nevertheless. So yeah. How many iPhones in the audience, by the way? Quite a few, I guess. And how many babies? All right. A last number that I would like to share with you is here in Denmark, 60% of Danes actually do something else while watching television. So, and namely accessing internet services in front of their television, and only a few proportion actually focuses on the television ratings. So there is really a challenge in Aalborg and a real competition for the Aalborg. So that's great. That's the status now, but what is going to happen in the near future? Well, this is what I will try to explain now, or at least there are some main trends that we have discovered throughout the past years. And one of them is about what I call increased device independence. And what I mean by this is simply that it doesn't really matter which device we have access to. The idea is we are supposed to be able to consume media no matter what we have at our disposal. So whether you start watching, more and more we will have a situation where you start watching the television show on your television, TV show on your television, and then maybe go out of the house or change the room, and you will bring your television show with you on another device. So it doesn't really matter which device you have. The important is that you have access to the information you want. More personalization, especially in terms of mobile devices. We've seen that already. We already have wallpapers, personalized wallpapers, or screensavers, or those kind of things. But more and more in terms of content, it will be personalized content that is dedicated to what you are willing to watch at the time. There is a lot of research going on in render systems, and even though we are maybe using that already, not all the population is doing that, but it will spread out quite rapidly. What I present here is the traditional couch potato situation where we are watching TV. We are watching flow TV by sitting in the couch, and basically the television decides for us what the content we will watch. So if we want to be entertained, we will just switch the channel to a movie or to a TV show, and if we want to have access to information, we will change to the news channel. This is quite passive watching, and this is going to remain. There is no going away of this situation. Also because it's quite comfortable to have the television decide for us what we want to, what we're watching. But in parallel, we will have more and more access to the type of applications that I've introduced to you a bit earlier, where you have access to a lot of different functions that are on top of the content that is broadcasted through the television. So in terms of second screens, we will have a lot more interconnectivity between the television set and other applications. The good news is that broadcasters have understood that and they are supportive in this phenomenon. So people like DR or TV2 in Denmark are actively working on and releasing applications that consider all those phenomena and are actually releasing applications that allow you to access content on either platform or to access extra information during some TV shows and engage the audience in those TV shows. And this is a global phenomenon. This is not happening only here. I have also had the opportunity to spend some time in Japan during my PhD, where I basically experienced the same challenges and the same development going on there. There are really some converging points in this area as well. All right, but that was really global. This is maybe not extremely surprising or even new, but this is at least going on, and this is for sure will be happening in the near future. Who would care about this kind of research? Who cares about that? To whom does this matter? Well, a few answers. First of all, as we discussed already, the broadcasters are really interested in knowing how populations are accessing their content. So if we want to have access to their content through other devices than the primary screen of television, then they have to release it for the audience. And that's actually what they're doing. So this is really important for them to know what those trends and what the future will hold in this area. For device manufacturers, it's also very important. Think about phone manufacturers or TV manufacturers. They want to know what kind of functions to put into the devices and how the devices is used, and so the performance can match the requirements. And for us researchers, it's also very interesting to know what to research, right? So there's been a lot going on in the second screen field this past few years, and this is a typical example of a topic that we've discussed here that is really well spread in the literature these days. How did we come up with those trends? Well, basically, as I said, a number of user studies. So we have conducted 10 user studies that I report in my PhD thesis. A few of them I might go a bit deeper into in the second part. So if you haven't voted yet, by the way, you can still do so for a few slides. And so I will go through those studies for now, and really briefly to give you a brief overview of the way we travel throughout this project. So first, we had the opportunity to put mobile TV in the hands of users, and we really started with this idea of mobile television. So we had a working prototype of a mobile TV service, and that we put in the hands of users and asked what they think about this kind of service, in what kind of context do you think to be using those kind of questions. Then we moved on to a more specific aspect and tried to see how competition and collaboration dynamics could be used to create new services in terms of mobile media. Then we specifically looked into how much delay is acceptable while switching from a channel to another on a mobile TV service. Further, we went to another specific aspect of the interaction in this area, where we tried to investigate how to actually transfer video content from a mobile phone to a TV screen. And we investigated a few schemes for doing so, and we came up with some recommendations. First, I collected some drawings made by participants to explore how they relate to mobile technology and to television, and how they feel about those devices, and try to explore this more personal aspects of the interaction with technology. Further in this area, we also explored this convergence with a number of students who created some drama plays, and we had a few acting scenarios where they were embodying their interaction with the technology. First, we moved back a little bit to the original idea of the mobile television, and we launched a survey of active users of television, of mobile television. Then we focused on the second screen phenomenon, and we developed some prototypes and tried that with end users. I also conducted some interviews, so I went to ask people who actually know what's going on in the field. So some scholars, of course, and some broadcasters. Did that both in Denmark and Japan, to try to compare a little bit the trends there. And finally, launched a survey, a cross-cultural survey, on trying to explore how technology is used, and by technology I usually refer to television and mobile phones in Japan and so that's quite a lot of studies, and as you can see, this was in a chronological order, and so we didn't really go from a very conceptual idea down to more specific details of the interaction with one specific product. We more explore different ideas to have try to come up with a more holistic view of the topic. All the methods are really different, and they gave us a very good perspective, very good overall perspective on the topic. You might guess already, so 10 different kind of research methods, but there are really a large number of methods to conduct user experience research, as we did here. So how do we choose the methods? Because it can be a bit hard sometimes to select how to do the research here. So basically, it really depends. That's the answer to everything in the user experience, I guess. It really depends on different factors. First, on where do you want to conduct the study? Do you want to have people come in the lab and have a lot of control over the experiments? Or do you want to go in the field and have a little bit more realism in the experiment? Do you want to do online research? It depends also on when you want to conduct your experiment. When is your development cycle? Do you have just ideas, concepts to do with, or do you have maybe a product on the market already that you want to improve what you work with? And it depends also on the period of experience you are interested in. Are you interested in just one specific interaction part of the product, or are you maybe interested in discovering changes over time? It also depends on who you're asking. Are you asking experts? Are you asking one user? Maybe groups of users interacting with each other? So that also changes the method you will use. And of course, what question you want to ask. Are you interested in behavior? Maybe change of behavior over time? Do you have maybe several designs that you want to try with users and decide which one is best? Or maybe you want some insight on how the product you are interested in is actually used in everyday life. So now the votes are closed. That was for the little getting away. So we'll check on the results. I hope some of you have been actually voting. We'll see. Ooh. Certainly. Thank you very much. I actually didn't expect that. All right, so we'll first discuss the cross-cultural survey and some usability ideas. And hopefully we'll do that again. All right. So the survey we conducted. Well, why a survey? Why would you do the survey? Well, several reasons. First of all, it's fast to develop, and it's fast to put out in lab. And then you don't really need anything to do actually once it's out there. It's cheap to create because you don't need too much equipment. Usually you will do that online, or at least that's what we did here. So no need for a lot of equipment. It's scalable. You can add, of course, a lot of questions, so you can inquire quite thoroughly through your of interest, and deploy it in a number of venues. And it's quite easy to deal with. It's easy to well, to set up. It doesn't require too much technical knowledge, and it's also usually quite easy to manage once it's a few challenges that I faced while putting out my survey in terms of design, in terms of language. I conducted the survey in both Denmark and Japan, so there were quite a few challenges there. I will go through this a little bit in details afterwards. Recruitment is always a bit tricky for those surveys, and the analysis of data is always, of course, a problem. So, as I said, this survey was about how convergence is experienced in Denmark and Japan. So I had a number of questions that I was interested in, and it was about 20 questions, something like this. And there is one design aspect that you might want to consider that is quite important to consider. Whether you want to go for a long page that you have to go to scroll through, and then you can see the entire set of questions from scratch, but you also have to scare the users that you have many questions. Or you want to divide the survey into several parts and go through different pages. So in our case, since we didn't have that many questions, we went to the first option, where you know exactly how the survey looks like, and it's also faster to go through the parts. One language issue that I faced came out of the question that had to do with how people feel without, how would you feel without your mobile phone, or how would you feel without your television. And I basically, as potential answers, I used the 6 basic emotions, one of which is disgust. And disgust, when you translate it into Danish, it has something to do, or correct me if I'm wrong, hopefully that's right, that has to do with loathing and rejection. Whereas in Japan, we had actually 2 different meanings, which were slightly different. One of them having to do with losing interest, and the other one with being irritated. So already in Japan, you have different definitions for the same word, and then when you compare to the Danish translation, it's also a little bit different. So how do you do with this? Well, it doesn't mean that your answers will be wrong in any way, I think. It's just that when you analyze the data, you need to be aware of those differences, and then when you interpret the data, you need to make clear that there might be a risk of different interpretation for the same meaning. Recruitment process for a survey. Basically, we started with a convenience sampling, which means that we asked our colleagues, we asked our friends, and you ask basically the people you know to try to spread the word by word of mouth, and try to create a sample base for your users. And for this, social networks are actually quite interesting. Networks like Facebook or Twitter are particularly interesting because of the rapid spread of information. And so we try to use this and create, basically the idea is to have a small number of participants at first and try to delegate the recruitment process to those participants. So they will try to invite their friends, who in turn will invite their friends. And that's what we call the snowball sampling. We start with a small seed of participants, and hopefully your participant base will grow over time. So we try to recreate that. Working limitedly, I would say, for a number of reasons. But that's not really the point here. The role of ambassadors is also quite interesting. Ambassadors are people who have lots of connections usually, and they are important in their communities. They are opinion leaders usually, such as professors, or well, in general, people who are well connected and well recognized. So if you have those people to spread the word of your work there, then usually you will have a quite fast distribution of your survey as well. And finally, the analysis of the data. Since we are dealing with quantitative data, we need to set up some statistical analysis of the data, of course. And this can be a little bit tricky sometimes to choose, once again, the methods to analyze the data. And this really has to be done while you design your experiments. So otherwise, you will really end up with not knowing how to analyze the data set that you got. And that's, you will end up in some, not really analyzing the proper data. So a few recommendations maybe when dealing with online surveys like this. For if there are a couple of students maybe around that might be interesting. Starting with a rather large sample size. In our case, we had about 100 participants from each country, which is not extremely large, but I think, in my opinion, is well, I think that it's large enough to represent the populations that we had. We were targeting rather young and IT literate population, which was basically very well represented in the data in the populations that we had. So 100% per each region was about enough. We should use a variety of ways to recruit the participants. So direct ways, sending direct emails or asking directly people to participate, and also indirect, like the snowball sampling method or word of mouth. And try to reach some members of the population that are sometimes not well connected or not a bit isolated. But if you don't try to reach those people that are maybe a bit harder to get, then you risk to have a biased sample. So the way to do that is to basically identify those people and try to contact them directly. So that's also what we do. The role of ambassadors that I discussed a little bit before is really crucial in going and in spreading the word. And whether you are recruiting participants or disseminating the results afterward, you should be quite transparent about your results, your methodology, and everything basically that has to do with the survey, so that people feel a bit more comfortable about the whole survey. So that was it for the survey. And now here, I will talk about another study that we've conducted in the lab here. One of the points here of the study is this simulated environment where why do we want to simulate an environment? Why not just go to a place that we are interested in? Well, simply because some settings, some environments are not made for this. Think about critical situations of emergency, or think about the submarine. You don't really necessarily have a submarine at our disposal, and that's really hard to recreate. Okay, these are extreme examples, but if you think about more concrete situations or more simple situations where we have a large mobility, a lot of movements going on, and sometimes it can be a bit hard to either recreate the setting or go into an actual setting. So the study that we've used here has to do with the duration of switching between different channels on the television, on a mobile phone. So imagine you have a mobile phone with mobile television on it, and you're switching from a channel to another. It usually takes a little while to change channel. Already on a regular television, it takes a few seconds now with digital televisions, and on a mobile phone, you can expect that it's a bit more. But how long is a bit more, and how long is acceptable? So this is typical data that we've collected, where on a scale from 1 to 5, on 1 being totally unacceptable and 5 to be totally acceptable, how long is the delay rated? So this is compared with some other studies, and our data is the central line with the connected dots. Just to let you know that this is the kind of data that we won't go too much into the details of this. If you're really interested in how long people are willing to wait while switching channels, I will direct you to one of the papers that you can access in the second screen app. We're also interested here in knowing how the transition looks and how this might affect the results, the likability or the acceptability. So we tried with an animated icon, like on many Apple devices, where you have something that just rotates to tell you that, to indicate you that something is happening. And we also tried with a low version of the video. And basically, what we found out is that the icon was much better, generated much more acceptable results than with the low quality video. And finally, as we were discussing at the beginning, we tried different settings. We tried to see if the test environment had an impact on the results of the studies. And so we had some participants taking the test in a quiet laboratory where nothing really happened. They were just sitting down and going through the test. and the same thing happened in a usability test. That I will come back in a second. Basically, the test went like this. Participants had a mobile device in their hand, and they had to go through a playlist of videos between which they were experiencing some delays. Then they had to rate for each delay, which on the scale from 1 to 5, how acceptable the transition was. So they had to do that for about 33 delays. So some did that in the lab and some did that in the tent. And what happened in the tent, basically we had a test area where the participant was sitting, and the control area from which was displayed on one side of the tent a video. And the video was about somebody sitting in a bus, shooting from a first person. So it was basically 10 minutes of somebody sitting in a bus, so looking at the outside of the window, looking at the other passengers. So nothing really happening, but a typical situation that would happen if you take a bus, for example, from the university to downtown Aalborg. And together with the sound of the environment of the video, this kind of recreated a more realistic environment for it. Did this matter? Did this influence the results? Well, absolutely not. So basically, it didn't really matter whether people were sitting in the lab or in the more realistic environment, which is kind of good news. Because for us researchers, it means that if we want to conduct these kind of studies, we don't have to go to the mother of creating more realism in the experiment. So we might as well just sit in the lab and the results will be similar. That's what it means. Okay, so that was two of the studies that have been conducted in this thesis. And so when we put all this together, how do we make sure that all those studies, already those two that we've been discussing, are quite different? And how do we make sure that if the topics are different, the methods are different? So when we put that together, how do we make sure that the results are kind of valid, coherent, and make sense together? Well, a few answers to that that I will go through. First of all, triangulation. Triangulation means like in a GPS system where you need different satellites to get a precise coordinate of your location. Well, here we use different methods to have different perspectives on the same topic. So for instance here, we used the survey, the workshops, and some expert interviews to investigate the topic of second screens. And basically those three perspectives that we got on the same topic, and we'll also discuss some additional topics for each method, of course, but the whole discussion about the second screens throughout those three different methods allows us to have a better understanding of the concept of what's happening in this area, and allows us to be a bit more comfortable about our findings. Another way of validating a little bit the approach has been is a framework that has been put out by a researcher called Morse, and basically this framework requires or recommends to make sure that we have a coherent methodology. That means that the methods that we use should be coherent to the topic that we investigate, and that makes a lot of sense, right? We shouldn't use a research method that is completely out of touch. You should also make sure that your sample population is appropriate, and by appropriate we mean knowledgeable about the topic and non-biased. In terms of data collection and analysis, this framework says that we should not have one stage of data collection and then a stage of data analysis, but do them in parallel and go back and forth. Because some new ideas will come up when you analyze the data, and you might want to collect some more data to further investigate these new areas. Theoretical thinking means that you should not get stuck in going deeper and deeper into details. So basically, sometimes you need to step up and get a little bit more an overview over the study. So don't get stuck into detail, but try to come out sometimes. And that's also why we had this iteration cycle where we came back at the later stage of the project. We still investigated some conceptual ideas and some non-specific areas. And finally, theory development means that as you are collecting data and as you are conducting your research, you should also think about the theory behind. And you shouldn't necessarily start with the theory and apply it, but also get feedback from the data to your theory. So that's a little bit similar to grounded theory from the social science. And finally, something that I'd like to spend a little bit of time on is something that I came up with. And I had those 10 methods that I used, and I tried to think about a way to analyze how good they were and how worth were they. So I tried to analyze how good they were at providing findings and how much it cost to implement the data. And based on this, I tried to rank the study that I used. So performance, to evaluate performance, I thought about first the novelty of the findings. So has it been published already, or is it something completely new? Is the finding disseminated in a peer-reviewed way or not? Is it reliable? So how strong we feel about our findings? Is it internal valid? Is it valid internally? Which means that how robust is it against experimental conditions? So if we repeat the experiment and change some parameters, will we get the same findings or will we get something completely different? And the scope of the finding, how generalizable it is. So does it apply to just the sample that we have, or can we generalize this to a larger population? Performance was evaluated at two levels. First, on the topic that we were investigating, and secondly, on the method itself. And for the method itself, the internal validity and the scope didn't really were relevant, so we didn't consider it. Anyway, for the topic-based performance, we can see that the online survey performed really well here, and this is, by the way, an open scale that is related to, that is proportional basically to the amount of findings that the method generated. So here basically the online survey generated a lot of findings, and it also scored pretty well on the characteristic that I described previously. Compared to this, the focus group and the SMS counting methods that we've used and that we haven't discussed actually today were really not so performant. On the method itself, This means that we've learned a lot about the drawing method, and we've learned a lot about the development approach. But we haven't learned too much about the workshop and focus. And finally, the cost. So the cost, to evaluate the cost of the methods that we used, I took into consideration the team size, so how many people were involved in designing, conducting, and analyzing the results from each experiment. I also took into consideration the materials, so how much equipment did we need, how much did it cost to buy all the equipment, and mostly the equipment, the material cost. Development, did we need to develop anything, any prototype, or could we reuse something that we had already, or did we need anything at all? And finally, the time it took to design the experiment and conduct it, and analyze the results. And based on those parameters, I found out that the drawings were really cost efficient compared to the workshops, where we actually needed a lot of equipment to build a lot of devices, and that also, and it took also a long time to implement. Compared to that, the drawings were really quite easy. We just needed pieces of paper and just use it. So examples of performance over cost ratios. This is not a scale from 0 to 10. Once again, it's open. For several reasons. One of which is because I have used only 10 research methods, and there are plenty of others. And this is also dependent on the project, because this is based on the findings that I found. So, in the context of my project, those methods that I've used got those scores. But it doesn't mean that in another project we will do a bit different. But in any case, it means that here, the two top methods here, namely the survey and the drawings, were really, really relevant for the project and provided lots of good feedback for maybe not so expensive costs. However, some other methods here are a bit more questionable, and maybe we could ask whether it was worth it. Some ideas for future work, maybe based on this. This project has been focusing mostly on Denmark and Japan, and it could be interesting to integrate some other countries in this area, most notably developing countries, maybe, because for now we focused on really highly literate and IT literate societies and highly connected societies, but maybe developing countries would be actually quite interesting to take into consideration. Since we had a very overall perspective on the topic, it would be nice to go a little bit deeper into some of the aspects and maybe iterate on some of the studies, or maybe just conduct additional studies to further expand the findings. And finally, this last analysis that I made about this performance and cost hadn't really been made before, so this is something that is. This is the first version. This is the first attempt to try to let's say, formalize the analysis of your research method and your actual methods that you're using. So this needs a little bit more considerations, and maybe apply that to other projects and try to identify whether the parameters that I've used are correct, or maybe try to improve a little bit the methods. And I think this is more or less all I have time to talk about it. So if we haven't learned anything yet, you can know that today is International Mountain Day, so I will wish you a very happy International Mountain Day. And thank you very much for your attention.